ask these people, I say, what is your definition of science? Because you're the one who said it's not scientific. Okay, I'll tell you my definition later, but what is your definition of science? And more often than not, they're at a loss, and what they actually mean a lot of times is the Western material science. See, when they say it's not scientific, what they're talking about is that, oh, if you give them a concept, can I touch it? Can I see it? Because observation is very important in science. I admit that too. Observation is important. So now the question comes, is it something physically observable? So at the very outset, not that our people did not pay attention to material science, they did. But more so than that, they spent a lot of time and energy. This is over thousands of years. This is not, something I'm making up, right? So for many, many thousands of years, people studied very, very carefully. They looked into the science of energy. As we know, in the world, there is matter, there is energy. They are like two sides of the same coin, right? So the universe, the value of the universe is actually between what happens between energy on one side and matter on the other side. No matter without energy and no energy without matter, right? The two sort of go hand in hand. So when you talk about energy, the question is, if you look at a scientific principle related to energy, then we need to have as a starting point some kind of hypothesis. I come and say this is the way it is. Now, that may be true, that may not be true. So in science, what you do is you have to prove that it is true, or you have to prove that it's not true, right? So what for me to do that, if I have the required knowledge about the topic, I design an experiment which will prove either this way or that way, right? So this experiment should have an input or set of inputs, and on the other side, it has a set of outputs. So now the question is, when you look at the output based on a specific input, if my hypothesis is true, it'll give one output. If it's not true, it'll give a different output. So in this controlled experiment, if I try this experiment over and over and over again, tens of thousands of times, if the majority of the time I get the output that says, no, this is true, I accept it as a scientific fact, right? Until a new hypothesis comes along to prove otherwise. This is science. This is how science is done, right? So my claim is that before you say that something is not scientific, have you done this experiment? Have you tried it? Forget about tens of thousands of times. Have you at least tried 10 times to see what the outcome is? And if you have not done that, and if you don't know how to design this experiment, please do not come and say it's not scientific. So we need to go with this definition of science to start with, right? Secondly, we say Hindu. Hindu, as many of us know, is a more regional, it came from Sindhu, people who were living along the Sindhu River, or Hindus. Like even now, if you go to Spain and places like that, they refer to Indians as Hindus. They don't mean anything religious. They just mean they're from this region, right? So it's not so much about Hindu, like she said, just a few minutes ago. Our traditions, our way of life is based in the Vedic knowledge. And that knowledge also has the science part, right? So if you look at Karma Kanda, for example, in the Vedas, it tells you, oh, you do this, you do that, and so on. Whatever that may be, depending on the ashrama we're talking about, one could be a brahmachari, or it could be a grihastha, whatever stage in life you're at, there are certain karma that is defined, right? And what we're going to talk about today is basically three of them. And each one of them, by the way, we can talk for hours and hours. And unfortunately, we cannot go into the depth. So, what I'm going to give you is basically my understanding of the science behind some of these, I would call karma instead of ritual. Because a ritual is something you do sort of mechanically every day, right? This is not a ritual. This is Vaidika karma. So I would redefine this title and say that the science in Vaidika karma. Now, if that makes sense to you, Vaidika, I don't have to explain that. So let's talk about karma for just a minute, because there's a huge difference between karma and a ritual. So karma has three parts. These three parts, on one hand, you have the physical action, and then you have the speech, and the third one is your intention based upon jnana. So when I say I want to do something, I'll give you an example. I'm sitting in front of my laptop, right? So if I were to hit the keyboard and type something, right? Question is that karma or not? I'm sitting here just typing something on the keyboard. Well, it depends. The outcome depends upon whether I hit the keyboard or not, but do I understand what would happen if I hit certain keys in a certain sequence? So it's based upon knowledge, right? So the jnana, and again, I keep using these two words. Jnana is not exactly knowledge, it's much more than knowledge. But just today, we'll use that word as a substitute. Okay. So the knowledge behind the physical action, and the third component, of course, is the speech. So we call it, kaya, vacha, manasa. That's what, if you want to use Sanskrit words, right? So now, what has happened is that when I do something, whatever it might be, some Vaidika karma, when I do something, the speech is also important. So the mantra, see, I cannot take any word, right? Suppose I say, Jack and Jill went up the hill. Is that a mantra? Well, it's a set of words. So I sit here and keep saying that 1,000 times. Jack and Jill went up the hill. Jack and Jill went up the hill 10,000 times. Will that do anything? Probably not. Probably not. So what is the difference then between a Vaidika mantra and a set of words, just a set of random words? The difference is that when you look at that mantra, even the actual sounds are so carefully selected in a given sequence, when those frequencies, even if I don't know the meaning, a given set of frequencies, if it comes through my system, that in itself will do something, even if I don't know the meaning of what I'm saying. So Vaidika mantra, that's why it's called mantra, because it has effect on the mind. Manas, mantra, there's tantra, yantra, all these things. But mantra is something that has effect on the mind, right? So when we, in many Vaidika karma, we have certain mantra that goes along with certain action. And that's very important, by the way. So you cannot just randomly say something. Even the intonation is important. I said this so many times in other platforms that, like, for example, if you chant a Shanti mantra from the Vedas, from the Upanishads, right? At the end of each one of those things, they always says Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. or I can say Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It's not the same. It is not the same. So intonation is extremely important. The transition in a upward, I'm talking about frequency wise, transition in an upward and a downward in a given sequence that goes along with a certain sound is very important. The Omkara itself, the Bijakshara, Omkara, has 8 parts. It has 8 parts. And if you go all the way to the very end, the 2 last components of a Omkara is Shanti and Atishanti, right? So that you don't even hear. So if somebody chants Omkara properly, the final 2 parts in those 8 components of the Omkara, you don't actually even hear that, but it's there, right? So all of these things, the mantra is very important, the speech part is very important, the karya, the action is important, but most important is the jnana behind the person doing it. Just like, a computer scientist typing something on a computer can accomplish a lot more than some random person typing something randomly. Action is the same, but the results are very different.